causes nervousness in interviews?
I think it's three main things. I think it's not knowing what to expect. I think people worry about maybe they're going to get something wrong, or not portray themselves in the right way. And I think it's not being prepared.
How do you feel that nervousness actually manifests itself?
Well, I think there's a lot of physical symptoms that people get, and I don't know whether you've had any experience with those. I think you can get like a really dry mouth, and just about when you're about to speak, you're thinking, oh my gosh, I don't have any saliva left, or you can get
definitely happened to me.
Butterflies in your stomach, where your stomach actually feels a little bit unsettled.
I often find I get quite warm as well.
Yeah, then you feel your cheeks getting warm. I think there's also that thing about the sweaty palms. And I think people going for interviews, sometimes they know they have to shake the person's hand. And sometimes, of course, what happens is we also can get mental blanks.
Yeah.
And if we focus on, oh my goodness, I'm going to forget what to say, that is actually when we go blank. And it's because whatever we focus on actually expands.
What can somebody do, in your opinion, to actually minimise nervousness?
Anything to do with being nervous, or any state really, everything starts and ends, I believe, with the mind. So it's to do with your mindset. I think the first thing to do is choosing, and it's a choice, so I'll explain that a bit later.
Okay.
But choosing how to actually control your mind. You actually choose to focus on different things than your sweaty palms, or maybe your warm cheeks, or whatever it is that you might be feeling.
If you were to advise somebody who's going to an interview, maybe five top tips, what would they be? Yeah.
Well, I think the first thing is really being clear on that it's what's in your mind. So choosing to focus on the right things, and the right things are the following four things. But being aware that it's actually a choice what we do. I think one thing is to find out as much about the interview as possible.
Okay.
So about the company, what it looks like, what people are wearing, who's going to be in the interview, so whether there's one person or 5 people. Because the more you know, I think, what to expect, that will actually take a lot of the nervousness out. Because often you go in there and you think, oh, what's it going to be like?
Yeah.
What are they going to be, So if you can take some of those elements out, so that's my number 2 thing. My third thing is really thinking about why you want that job.
Yeah.
Yeah, being clear on that. Because sometimes people will also ask you that. So don't just go for a job because you can. Think about why you want it. And think about why you're good for it. And really think about some situations where you can demonstrate why you're good for it. And you know how these days a lot of companies might use behavioral questions?
Yeah.
So if you are already thinking about examples, for example, if you say, I always demonstrate leadership, for example, right? Then think about a situation, a little story you can tell about how you could do that. Because my 4th tip is actually to rehearse and visualize. Okay. So I think practicing, if you think about actors, could you imagine being an actor and going on stage and never having read your lines? That would be like, nobody would do that, right? And I think if you're going for an interview...
That's quite a good metaphor.
If you're going for an interview, I think if you have some examples, it's like being an actor. Let's face it, going to an interview is a little bit like a performance. You are trying to, I guess, show them your best side. That's what it's about. And also visualization. So it's like if you know there's going to be 3 people on a panel, imagine you're sitting there in front of these 3 people and you're giving that story about how you demonstrated leadership, or whatever it is, the competencies that you want to actually show them.
Yeah.
My last tip is almost the most important one. If you only do one thing out of all 5, so I've left the best to last, is remember to breathe. But seriously, have you ever had that experience when you're really nervous or a little bit anxious?
Yeah. Or even just a bit too enthusiastic.
Some people actually then hold their breath, or start to just do this really shallow breathing to here, almost like this. What happens then is you actually deprive your brain of oxygen, And you know, that actually makes us forget things.
You know, on the actual day of the interview, you know, maybe the morning of your interview, would there be anything, you know, that you would encourage people to do or not encourage people to do?
I think practicing your breathing is really one of them, like getting your breath under control before you get there. I think if you do have butterflies in your stomach or your stomach is unsettled, peppermint tea is really good for that.
Okay.
Also, if you have situations where you know you've done really well, so maybe a past interview you've been to, a job you've gotten, or some success you've had, it's not a bad thing to maybe think about that situation and put yourself into a bit of a success mindset.
Yeah, so maybe
before you go out the door.
Yeah, maybe the best interview that you've had or the one that got you the job in the past.
Yeah.
Cool. And what about actually, I mean obviously that's prior to the interview, what about actually in the interview? You know, if you do find yourself, you know, getting a bit panicked or you do have a blank, what would you, how would you overcome that?
Well, there's a couple, and I know some people will say if you're nervous, tell the interviewer you're nervous. I actually don't advise that because I don't know whether you've ever experienced this, but it's like things that we feel, right, on the inside are magnified sometimes 100-fold. But whether I'm nervous or not, actually if I don't tell you, you may not even notice it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you are really nervous, despite all those things, I would probably just ask if I could have a glass of water, or just to slow it down a bit, maybe so they can feel...
Just to take that pause and hopefully,
But I probably wouldn't say, you know, I'm really nervous or something like that, because the interviewer may not have noticed. When people are nervous, they think that everybody is focused on them. Yeah. So it's kind of like an inside-out approach, but really, in reality, I believe that most people focus on themselves. So the interviewer is really sitting there, in my view, in my mind, thinking about, can this person do the job? What can they do for my company? Are they going to be any good for my role? They're actually not thinking about you as, are you a nervous person, or do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're thinking about completely different things.
Yeah, I quite like that angle. Yeah.
Most people think about themselves, not about you. I think that's really important to remember, you know, if you're nervous in a situation.
Generally, you know, if somebody is a very, very nervous person, are there any, you know, longer term hints that you've got in terms of how they could build up the confidence over?
Well, what was it you said before about rehearsing and practicing, right? Yeah, that was actually your tip. That's my thing. I think if you like anything, the more we do it, the better we get at it. But you need to, when you're practicing and rehearsing, actually speak out loud. Because you know, when we're rehearsing in our head, in our mind, it's different to hearing our own voice.
Very different.
Because sometimes I know people will say, oh yeah, I've rehearsed it many times internally, and then when they actually go to speak, they almost get a little bit startled by their own voice, you know. So it's also hearing how you sound yourself.
So obviously nervousness is such a big topic that can obviously, you know, it does affect the majority of people, at least at, you know, one stage in their life as well. But I just think with, you know, like we summarised, with visualisation and focus, and, you know, the more you are able to visualise, I think it definitely can go from being, you know, a really big thing at some stages to hopefully, you know, being a much smaller thing that won't, you know, stand in the way of people getting jobs.
Well, it's all in the mind, really. So choose what you focus on, and focus on the things that matter. And remember that people can't see how you're feeling inside, and they're thinking more about themselves, not about you.